Since the inaugural season of F1 in 1950, there have been 34 different world champions. That's out of 772 drivers, by the way. Those names like the Clarks, the Vettels, the Schumachers, the Hamiltons will all have their names etched in history. However, for every number 1, there has to be a number 2. A second place. So I thought I'd go through my top 3 drivers that have never won a title. Now it's not a factual list of the people that came closest, so to say. At least that's not true for some of these names. Anyway, these are my top 3. Firstly though, a few rules I set myself. In this instance I wanted to focus on drivers from the late 19s through to the sort of mid 2000s, essentially looking at 3 decades of the sport more or less, as I thought it would make it a bit more comparable between the drivers, as well as making my job to pick 3 a little bit easier. So sorry to all you Leclerc fans out there, he's not here. The other rule I set myself is that in order for a driver to qualify for the list, they can no longer be racing in F1 currently. So without further ado, let's get underway. In no particular order then, my first pick is a driver with the squarest head ever to race in F1, David Coulthard, Scotland's 3rd most successful driver. David is our first victim of unfortunate timing. His F1 career started in the limelight as he was brought in to take Senna's place following his death at the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix. Talk about big shoes to fill. Coulthard kept his head down though, and in every race he finished in the points, with the best result of P2 in the Portuguese Grand Prix of the same year. It is worth noting, of course, that Coulthard didn't compete in all the remaining races of that year. Nigel Mansell actually took his place for 4 of those remaining 12 races. So all in all, sort of 3/4 of a season, David did a good job, and Williams decided to retain his services for the 1995 season. An improvement on the previous year, he finished 3rd in the championship with 8 podiums, including his first win at the Portuguese Grand Prix, which obviously funny considering that that's where he got his first podium the season prior as well. Clearly he did take a liking to that track. 1996 rolled along and Williams dropped David, instead deciding to take on the young prospect of Jacques Villeneuve following his stellar rookie season at BAR Honda the season prior. Williams went on to win the title 2 years on the bounce, with both Hill in 1996 and Villeneuve in 1997. What could have been if Williams had chose differently? Coulthard obviously had talent and landed on his feet at McLaren, and that's where he stayed for the next 9 seasons, making him one of the most loyal drivers in the sport's history. During his time at McLaren, David had great success, scoring 51 podiums in total. That's 18 third place finishes, 21 second place finishes, and 12 wins. That translates to a best result in the championship of 2nd in 2001 behind a dominant Schumacher in the Ferrari. He also equalled his 3rd place finish in the championship with Williams a further 3 times in 1997, 1998 and 2000 respectively. The championship was never meant to be for Coulthard at McLaren, as if the Ferrari wasn't enough, he also had to deal with the one man Schumacher feared, the flying Finn Mika Hakkinen, who obviously won titles back to back in 1998 and 1999. Ultimately, Coulthard's tenure at McLaren came to an end in 2004 as the team chose to replace him in favour of Juan Pablo Montoya. He ended up at what was Jaguar F1 but was about to become Red Bull Racing. A new team and perhaps new opportunities. Well, the Red Bull of 2005 was not the Red Bull of today. Coulthard would finish his F1 career with the team, adding a further 2 third place podiums to his tally. Monaco in 2006, Red Bull's first podium by the way, and Canada in 2008. After 14 years in the sport, he called it a day. History then repeated itself, and in 2009, Red Bull were winners for the first time, winning 6 races across the season, and obviously went on to win back to back titles with Vettel. So why did it never happen for Coulthard in the championship? Well, David was known for his smooth driving style and being a stronger racer over qualifier. This meant that some circuits favoured his driving style more than others. Think Portugal again. His qualifying issues were highlighted when in 2003 F1 introduced a single lap qualifying format, something that Coulthard was vocally against. Ultimately, David just wasn't the all-round racer that you need to be in order to become a world champion. This, combined with the poorly timed driver moves, most of which were not his choice, meant it was never meant to be for the Scotsman. Next up, a driver who actually gave his seat to Coulthard when he left Jaguar for Williams in 2005. That's right, it's Mark Webber. The Aussie started his F1 career in 2002 with Minardi and had quite a famous first race in Melbourne. Of course, his home race as well, he finished 5th, scoring 2 points in a car that had no right to be finishing 5th. Was something special. He even had a little stand on the podium to celebrate these crucial points for the team in a difficult time, but also, of course, a home celebration with his supporters. It was just all in all a great time. He and the team would not score again for the rest of the season. Webber had a slower journey to the top end of the sport than our previous contender. In 2003, he moved to Jaguar Racing, where he stayed for 2 years. A step up from his previous team for sure, but really it was quite a small step. Scoring more points in both seasons than his time at Minardi, 17 points in 2003 and 7 points in 2004. Another change came in 2005 with a move to Williams BMW, a team that had won a race at the end of the previous season, so obviously looking to move up in the world. Another crossing in Coulthard and Webber's careers, as well as Webber took the seat of McLaren-bound Juan Pablo Montoya. The 2005 season was another step up for Mark, as he scored more consistently across the season, finishing with 36 points in 10th place in the championship. The highlight of the season being his first podium with a 3rd place in Monaco. He stayed at Williams for 2006, this time alongside rookie Nico Rosberg. Ultimately, this season was not as successful as the year prior. 11 retirements meant it was a season to forget. In the end, Webber finished on 7 points in 14th place. Webber chose not to re-sign with Williams in 2007, following being offered less money for a 2-year contract. He landed at Red Bull for the season, partnering up with none other than David Coulthard. As I've already briefly touched on the early Red Bull years in a way, I'll just highlight the key points of Webber's early time at Red Bull. It was 3rd at the 2007 European Grand Prix. It was Germany all along, and some consistent point scoring in 2008, but sadly no podiums. 2009 was the start of Webber's time at the front of the grid and was the first year Red Bull could fight for wins and podiums on the regular. One problem.
But here comes Sebastian Vettel!
The following years were the best of Mark's career, scoring 41 podiums with the Bulls, with 16 third place finishes, 16 second place finishes, and 9 wins, with his best championships coming in 2010, 11 and 13, where he finished in 3rd place, always behind his younger teammate. Now there's a few things that go into Mark's misfortune on the championship front. Mark was widely regarded as one of the fastest drivers through the fast corners. He had stellar braking ability, meaning he was able to carry more speed into the corners and brake later. But this came at a cost, as his tyre management wasn't where it needed to be. Having learnt the ropes of racing in sports cars with harder compounds of tyre in the late 1990s, it meant when racing on the softer Pirelli tyres on higher downforce V8 F1 cars, correlation just wasn't there. Altogether, just like Coulthard, but for different reasons, he did not have all the tools needed to become a world champion. This wasn't helped by the team seemingly prioritising Vettel at times, like the famous situation at the 2010 British Grand Prix, where the team gave Vettel Webber's front wing, or other times like Multi 21. All these things contributed to Webber not achieving the title in the sport, though I think he can be happy having played an important part in winning 4 constructors' titles. An additional note in Mark's case, his move to Williams in 2005 was one of the biggest what could have beens in F1. Webber had 2 teams looking for his services that year, one being Williams and the other being Renault, that year's eventual champions. Ouch. Finally then, the most famous number 2 driver of them all, Rubens Barrichello. Coming into the sport in 1993, Rubens had a longer career in the sport than either of the drivers I've mentioned so far. 19 years. Starting at Jordan, he had a fair run with this team, scoring his first couple of podiums there before moving to Stewart Racing in 1997 and continuing that good form with more points and podiums. It's easy to say Rubens was on the up and up. Come the 2000 season, and Ferrari came calling for the Brazilian's services, replacing Eddie Irvine to partner Michael Schumacher at the Prancing Horse. Now, We all know the story of the Ferrari dominance in the early 2000s. Michael Schumacher, Ross Brawn and Jean Todt were an unstoppable combination. It was his time at the Red Team that made Barrichello famous for being a number 2 driver. The most famous example being the 2002 Austrian Grand Prix, where Barrichello was told to let Schumacher by on the last lap to preserve Ferrari's best interests, and was threatened that if he didn't, Ferrari would terminate his contract. All this despite Michael already leading the championship, and an apparent promise from Jean Todt to Rubens, basically saying he would not be made to relinquish a victory to another driver. During his 6 years with Ferrari, Barrichello would rack up 9 victories, 24 second place finishes and 24 third place finishes. That translates to 2 second place finishes in the championship in 2002 and 2004, as well as a third place finish in 2001. Ultimately, he was no match for Schumacher, especially when the team were 100% behind the German. Who knows if Barrichello would have had more of a chance if they were given equal status at the team, but really, that was never going to happen. Following the 2005 season, Ferrari decided to replace Rubens for fellow Brazilian Felipe Massa. Barrichello slipped down into the midfield, driving for Honda for the 2006 season. Of course, we all know the fairy tale that was about to take place at Honda. After struggling through 2006, 7 and 8, with 2007 quite literally being a pointless season for the Brazilian, 2009 arrived, and with it, the newly named Brawn GP and the BGP 001. Just like that, Rubens was back at the front of the grid. A competitive car, no team orders. This was his chance, and it would be the last shot he had at the championship. Despite points, podiums and wins across the season, I believe it was Barrichello's rocky start to the season that sealed his fate. 3 second place finishes in the first 7 races to that year's champion Jenson Button's 6 wins out of the first 7 races meant the writing was on the wall. Ultimately, he finished 3rd in the championship behind Sebastian Vettel. To add insult to injury, Michael Schumacher came out of retirement to replace Barrichello, and while Jenson Button went off to McLaren and continued to win races for years to come, Rubens went to Williams, where he would spend the remainder of his years in F1, ultimately retiring at the end of the 2011 season. All 3 drivers were victims of being at the right team at the wrong time, being pitted against generational talents, or others deciding their fate for them. All 3 were immense talents in their own right, each having made permanent marks in the history of F1. While not everyone can make it as an F1 champion, these 3 are definitely some real racing legends. Thank you for watching. Please do be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know your 3 picks. You can check out some more of my videos on screen now, but other than that, I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.